Running a bar, cafe, or restaurant already gives you 1,000 things to think about, and this isn't another one. This is a real operator's spreadsheet, and it's genuinely comprehensive. But out of everything on that sheet, there's only 3 numbers he needs to focus on every single Monday. See, most operators think they only have 2 choices, which is to grow top line sales or to cut costs. But we see the same painful picture over and over again. And an owner who is flat out on the tools, chasing more top line sales when sales already look completely healthy, while their everyday running costs and operational expenses are quietly eating everything that the business earns. Let's ignore the accounting textbooks when it comes to your daily operations. You know, your everyday running costs come down to really 2 big things, which is your total labor plus your total ingredients. And it's not rocket science. Everything else on that profit and loss statement, your rent, your insurance, your software, your subscriptions, yes, it all matters, but it's mostly fixed. And you can't easily change your rent on a Tuesday morning. But your labor, your ingredients move almost every single week. So the great thing about that means that there are 2 levers that you can actually do something about in real time. So if you add your labor and your ingredients together and divide that by your sales, you get 1 clean percentage. So ideally, you want that number under 60%. Now, if it's under 60, you have 40 cents left for every dollar to cover your rent, your utilities, and ideally keep some of that as actual profit. Now, between 60, 65, 70, that starts to get this squeeze zone. You might be covering your bills, but you're essentially busy but broke. And if it's over 80, you're definitely potentially going backwards fast. And you know what? That's okay. But now is the time to look at this and do something about it. You don't need a massive quarterly audit to see where you stand. You just need to focus on these 3 numbers every Monday morning. All right, let's grab your coffee. Every Monday morning, we want to spend 15 minutes looking at just 3 numbers. And by the end of that first coffee, we know whether we've made money last week or what I need to do next week to fix it. Now, I've said the big 2 are labor and ingredients. So what are these 3 numbers? This is the 3-step routine that's going to take you about 5 minutes per number. So number 1, last week's sales. This client's net sales last week's were nearly $31,000. There's no GST on that number. Now, I want you to understand you've got to take the GST off if you're not currently doing it. So that's great. And that's exactly the number that we need. So he's gone to his point of sale. And there it is. It doesn't matter what you're running, Square, Lightspeed, or some weird system that it's some country town yobbo made for you. But whatever your system you're on, you know where that number lives. And I want you to go and get that for the week. And minus the GST, because that GST is sitting in your till, was never your money to begin with. You're just holding it for our friends, the tax office, because you know what? We all love paying taxes. So write it at the top of your page. And if you're not sure where that number lives in your own system, that's worth sorting out this week because everything else here depends on it. So most operators we talk to have never been shown. Call our team. We'll walk you through it and we'll try and sell you some shit along the way. But best you get it sorted out than keeping on not knowing what the fuck you're doing. So one thing is worth sorting out once and then never thinking about it again, which in 7 days makes up your week. So this client's week actually runs from Tuesday to Monday, not Monday to Sunday, because that's when his wages are processed. So labor and sales always line up on the same cycle without any manual adjustment. Now, you can run yours however suits your business. There's no right or wrong way. The only rule is pick a 7-day block that matches your payroll cycle to keep it simple and use the same block every single week. Don't change it. And that's what keeps these 3 numbers clean, comparable, and so you're not fighting your own numbers because sales, wages are accounted for on different days. Number 2, last week's labor. Now, this client's labor sat at 38.72%. that week. That's just under $12,000 against his sales. So pull your total wages on the same 7-day block and then add your super on top or whatever else that is cost you part of your employment. Now, we know Payday Super is live across Australia right now, so that money is leaving your account every pay run, not once a quarter. So you need to add 15% to your raw wage number if you're just working it out on paper. But you want to make sure you're safely covered, and supers, workers' comp, leave, all the insurances are all in there, 401k, wherever you are in the world. Make sure it's all included because it's cost of sales. Now, sometimes you're going to think, if I can just exclude this, it'll make me feel better about myself. the only person you're lying to is you. And here's the line most owners are going to skip. If your own wage isn't already in that number, go back and put it in now. Because whatever you should be paid for the hours that you worked last week, and not paid as just to make the numbers okay, paid properly like a real person, because you fucking deserve it. Because if your business only works when you work for free, you don't have a business. You got a job with terrible hours and terrible pay. And it's actually called slave labor. So number 3, last week's ingredients. Now, this client's cost of goods came in at 28.94, just under 9K for the week. This is every supplier invoice, the fruit, the veg, the rum that the chef secretly drinks to get through the day, and the Saturday night dash to the supermarket because you ran out of milk, the raw food, meat, produce, dairy. That doesn't carry GST anyways. But packaging, cleaning supplies, soft drinks, alcohol, we need to take the GST off. Take it off. The same as you did with your sales. So you're comparing apples with apples. So yes, an accountant's going to tell you what you bought isn't exactly what you used because the stock levels move. True. But for a Monday morning check, your weekly purchases are close enough to spot that something's wrong. So we want to add ingredients to labor and we want to divide that by the sales. So that's your percentage for the week. Why weekly? Why not quarterly? Here's why we run this pulse check every single week, not once a quarter. This same client, 3 weeks in a row. Week 1, 70%, over the line. Week 2, sales actually dipped slightly, but his combined number dropped all the way down to 58%. Comfortably healthy. Week 3, the one we just walked through, back up to 67.66%. Now let's look closer at what's actually driving that swing. See, his labor barely moved across all 3 weeks. So 42%, then 40%, then 39%. And his ingredients doing all the work, 27s and 17s and 28. Now that middle week isn't necessarily him running a tighter kitchen. It's more likely he stocked up on something in bulk the week before or the week after. And then that middle week just happened to be like a little bit lighter on deliveries. Now, this is exactly why we said earlier, what you buy isn't always what you use. If he panicked over that low 17.65 week and then thought he cracked the code, or panicked over the week before of 28.94 thinking that something had gone wrong, he'd be chasing a number that's really just a timing quirk in his order and not really changing in his kitchen. And that's why a weekly pulse check is not just a one-off verdict. You know, you're watching the trend. You're not reacting to any single week. And it should be the same with your sales. We all have good weeks, we all have bad weeks. But knowing your numbers is only half the job. The magic is what happens and what you do with it. See, every Monday that percentage earns you exactly one decision, not 10, just one. If your labor percentage was a problem, you look closer at the last week. Did I really need to have 4 people on the floor during the quietest afternoon shift? Or could I have done it with 3? And how do we test that? Well, we pull our hourly rig from our pod system. We understand on that day what our roster looked like, how many customers were coming through the door, and what our sales were. And then we look at that and we go, okay, we could have cut down on labor. But we all know weeks are different. So then we go back the last 3 weeks to that same day and we go and check it again. And do we have a pattern of higher labor in this period of time, or is it just a once-off? If your ingredient cost was a problem, did a supplier quietly creep up the prices, or is it a dish on your specials boards running at a margin you actually never costed out? What we want to do is we want to pick one of these numbers and we want to adjust it for the up and coming week. Then you check the pulse again against next Monday. So you aren't doing a massive month-end review, you're just taking a weekly pulse check. Now, after 4 or 5 Mondays of doing this, something massive shifts. You stop reacting to the business and you start steering it. Your eyes looking forward out of the windshield instead of looking in the rear vision mirror. And that sense of being back in the driver's seat is the real value of routine. So if you run these numbers and it comes back, you're doing 65%, don't panic. You've just uncovered a reason why your long hours aren't matching your bank account balance. It's just a problem with a clear number on it. And it's a problem that you can actually fix. So this isn't theory. We've had an operator come to us running a busy Italian restaurant, great revenue, packed most nights of the weeks, but his running costs was sitting up around 68%, like insane. But he was working 80 hours a week and couldn't work out why there was nothing left at the end of it. So we didn't redesign his menu. We certainly didn't tell him to cut staff. We just put this 15-minute Monday routine in place, and he actually did the work. Now, The first week he spotted there was a roster overlap on the slowest afternoon, and then the week after he caught a supplier price rise on beef that had gone through without him even noticing. And then 8 weeks of those small weekly adjustments, and his running costs went from 68% to 58%. Now, that shift doesn't happen to everyone. And that shift didn't just change his bottom line. But what it meant is he could step off the floor on the weekends. And for the first time in 2 motherfucking years, he got to go and spend some time with his kids. So this Monday morning, take 15 minutes and run the pulse check. You spent longer choosing the font on your special boards than it takes you to focus on these 3 numbers. And that's the real beauty of the system. It doesn't require you to become some full-time data analyst or spend your Sunday nights buried in an accounting platform. It's a highly effective, low-drag routine built specifically for busy operators who are already stretched thin. And by spending just 15 minutes once a week, you systematically lower your mental workload. So we want to stop the emotional guessing games, and we want to instantly protect your profit margins before a bad week can turn into a bad month, which turns into a bad quarter or a bad year. So if you want the exact 1-page tracking sheet we use to map out these 3 numbers and automate the maths, just click the first link in the description below and download it for free. Here's the real test though, and it's not the number you get, it's how long it took you to get it. If pulling those 3 numbers took you more than 15 minutes, if you were hunting through invoices, 3 different logins, and you couldn't find them, that's not a you problem, that's a system problem. And it's the one we fix first. If the thought of sitting down and doing all of this makes your stomach drop, it's worth paying attention to. Because most operators who feel that way have been carrying it for years, and they just assume that that's the job, and it doesn't have to be that way. There's a link below to book a free strategy session with my team. We'll look at your roster layout, the top of the cost lines, we'll show you exactly where the low-hanging fruit is, and get your time and your profit back. No catch, no obligation, just some clarity on where you're going and what you need to do. And if you do get your number and it's not what you hoped and you want an expert set of eyes on it, click the link. It's the exact same link. Run a pulse check this Monday, and I'll see you next week.